Recording in progress.
We are in the middle of explaining the idea of makif hakarav, makif harochik, and we also started explaining about how specifically we wanted to explain how specifically the mishalim, the chidos, things that are totally concealed, can explain and bring out the most hidden of all hidden levels, things that are sasim be'etzim. And to explain that, we started explaining about the mashal of the Baal Shem Tov, that to get a greater delight, the king sends his son away to faraway places, and then the way how he's brought back is because the Chacham starts speaking to him in his language, etc., in the language of this faraway place, to the son that doesn't want to come back. And the same way, the Sipurei HaTorah has the greatest and deepest secrets are hidden in the most simple stories of the Torah. Ultimately, that through that we reach and we reveal the highest level of Hashem's Tainuk. So now to go on further in the descent and the idea of how the Torah came down to such a low level. So now he's going to bring down from the Mezritcher Magid. Again, the third paragraph on the page, second paragraph in Ois Vav. With this will be understood also. The teachings of the Mezritcher Magid and the Pasuk, we will go a trip of 3 days in the desert. When the 3 days are going to be symbolic of 3 levels that the Torah descended. Because when the Torah was given in the desert, it was given in speech. Hashem spoke to us. Vaydaber Elohim is called Varmeilu Leimer. For sure, there needs to be thought that precedes the speech. Because all speech comes from thought. Nimtza Torah nitna bedibur machshava comes out that the Torah was given in speech and thought. Aval hamaisu biyadenu, but the third aspect, action, is in our hands. Kishanachnu oisim hamitzvos v'maisa, when we do the mitzvahs with action, oz onu miyachad im maisa hamitzvos shi oilu ma'asiyah madibur v'machshava. So then we join the action of the mitzvah, which is in the world of Asiya, with speech and thought, Shem Olam HaYitzira v'Abriya, that has to corresponds to the world of Yitzira and Briya, like it's a lot of times brought down in Chassidus, that the worlds of Briya, Yitzira, Asiya correspond to the 3 levushim of Machshava, Dibur, Ma'is. V'zeu derech shloshas yamim neilech b'midbar. This is what Moshe Rabbeinu told Pari, that we will go a way of 3 days. Meaning, Tahainu Shloishes Oilamos Neilech Bekabal Satoira, we will travel the 3 worlds of Asiya, Yitzira, and Briya in the receiving of the Torah. Magdim, the Mezritcher Magid prefaces Levair ben Egel, Lislapsh Satoira Boilmas, concerning the Torah becoming enclosed in the worlds, that the fact that we have to travel upwards, these 3 worlds, is because the Torah comes down through these 3 levels. And Mezritcher Magid says, "Shekol mash misrachik yosim misharshe." The more something becomes distant from its root, sham haTorah yotzim mitum sames. Over there, the Torah is more constricted, more limited. Ad shebal olam haz, until it comes down to this world. Sheboy hakol betzimtzum gamor. Than in this world, everything is in a very constricted state. Ad shekemat she'ein locha mitzvah she'ein ba mitzvah sheyurim, until there's almost no mitzvah, it doesn't have measurements to it, doesn't have a certain shear to it, that it comes down. That shows on the tzimtzum of it, that the fact that the mitzvah has to be done in a certain measure, in a certain number, in a certain amount, that shows on the level of tzimtzum. So that shows how low the Torah came down. The infinite Torah comes down to such a place of tzimtzumim and midas and shiurim. Someone that merits and sees the supernal worlds during doing the mitzvahs, he has a greater delight than those that are not appreciating and seeing all of those levels. How come? Why does that bring him to a greater delight? Lefi shekol mashu yoser elyon hu yoser rochav ve'einu b'tzimtzum k'mekan. The higher something is, the broader it is, and it's not as constricted as it is down here, top of page Chav Dalet. This is what the Chazal say. Bo Yecheskel v'loy pirsha. Yecheskel came and did not say how the Torah is, what form it takes. It says that he saw in a nevuah the way a scroll was opened up before him, and it was written on the front, in the inside and in the back of it, as opposed to, we'll soon see, that someone else saw a measure given to the scroll. He just saw a scroll open up without saying a number. Doesn't like Pirsha. I know why was there no measurement given to the scroll? Because he saw the scroll in very high worlds. Because in the higher worlds they're a great delight without any constriction. And the Gemara goes on to say, after Yecheskel saw the scroll that was in the air without giving it a measurement, so but as Zechariah came up Pirsham, he did explain the measurements. The Chsiv, like it says in Megillah, Afa, Arka, Goimer, Varachva, Goimer, it says about how long this Megillah was, the scroll was, and how broad it was. So what's the difference? Why did Zechariah did explain and give a measurement to it? Because Zechariah is in the world of speech. As it's known, that speech is something that's constricted. Therefore, he saw it with measurements. So this is the idea that the lower something comes down, the more limited, the more measured it is in as it constricts. Since the Torah mitzvahs are constricted in this world, therefore, every person has to direct during his fulfillment of the mitzvah, he has to point it. I think lechaven means more than just intention, but he has to direct it and connect it in action, in speech, and in thought. What's the benefit of that? With this, he elevates the mitzvahs from their physical state, and he unclothes them, he undresses them from their physicality, which is limited and limiting under the light, as we said before. And he brings them closer to their root, and he joins them in the higher worlds. And the primary thing is the delight that he takes, the enjoyment and pleasure during the fulfillment of the mitzvahs. How come? Because delight and enjoyment joins two opposites. The power of delight is to join two things that have no association one with each other, even if the two things are opposite from each other. So by having delight when he's performing the mitzvahs, it's able to join the physicality of the mitzvahs with the mitzvahs the way they are in the higher worlds, in the level of speech and the level of thought. And through doing this, he connects all the worlds to Hashem. Up till the ear is the content of the teaching of the Mezritcher Maggid. So if you just look at the teaching of the Mezritcher Maggid itself, it seems to lower and dismiss our physical world and say the physical world, the mitzvahs in the physical world is the lowest, and the only benefit is to bring it up higher. But down here, it's the limited delight. It has midas and shiurim and measurements, etc., etc. So the Rebbe is actually going to turn it around. The Rebbe says in the second paragraph, according to what Mezritcher Magi just now said about the great advantage of connecting it to the higher world, it's not understood. What's the need of action in the matter of speech? There's a greater delight. And concerning thought, the way the Torah existed before the giving of Torah, before the giving of Torah is even more tiny. Because what did he say? Matan Torah was with speech. Preceding the speech, there had to be thought. That means speech was at Matan Torah. Prior to Matan Torah was the level of thought, so it was even more delight. Kimavur, B'Torah Sarav Magid, like was explained in the teachings in the Mizrach Magid that we just quoted, Shekbchol Yedid Nasi in Shal Tzimtzum, in every descent, it becomes a level of constriction. And therefore, automatically, also the delight is also more constricted. So therefore, the Rebbe asks a simple question: why does it have to be the idea of going 3 days in the midbar? That there has to be traveling in the receiving of the Torah in the three worlds that should come down even into the world of action. Over there, the delight decreases. So seemingly, it is a loss. This whole idea. Why? What benefit is there? What reason should there be for it? And to explain that, he's going to go back to what we learned yesterday that Baal Shem Tov said. Now, but this matter will be understood according to the teaching of the Baal Shem Tov we mentioned before. Specifically through the Torah becoming enclosed in physical stories, some more delight becomes revealed. This is also understood from what's written in the Mizrach Magid's Torah, that delight joins two things. Move on from this understood to be able to join matters that are the most opposite, the most extreme. There's a need for even greater delight. The Rebbe explains how that applies in our case. The idea behind this is the delight, the way it is in the higher levels, like we said before, that there's the delight in thought and there's the delight in speech. It's measured and counted out according to the particular thing that's drawing down the delight. Meaning, in thought, according to its level, that's what the delight has to do with what machshav is about. It's not about speech. And the delight having to do with speech is limited to and has specifically to do with speech. But so there should be even greater tainug, additional delight, like the expression was earlier. A delight that's incomparably higher to all the levels of the matter of delight. The very essence of the idea of delight, a pure, unadulterated delight that we mentioned towards the end of yesterday's year. That is specifically in the world of Asiya, as we're going to explain why that's specifically found in the world of Asiya. Similar, actually, the point of it is also in the Mashal of Baal Shem Tov, that the true delight of the king is when the sun goes very far away. The same thing, the greatest delight is to be found in the world of Asiya. But it's also connected with the idea of Oir Chayzer, the rebounding light. Makif HaKarev or Makif HaRachik, similar to what's explained in the Maimer of the Frierdiker Rebbe's Yartzeit, concerning the two levels of Makif. The close Makif and the distant Makif, Sheim Beza and Yom Darnus of Lamayla and Ketzel Lamata in Tachlis. These are the two aspects of the infinite light of Hashem is higher to no end and below to no end. Nisbar Gambit Vramaskal Vukechas and Lekvait Kedushas Admar Hashem Nishmasein, top of page Chafei. It was also explained in the Maimer entitled Vukechasen. Shebemakifim Yesh Beis Madregis, and he calls it a little bit a different terminology than what we've been using most of the time here in this Maimer. What are these two levels? Makif Dar Yashar and Makif Dar Chayzer. The Makif of the direct light and the Makif of the rebounding light. Makif Dar Yashar Ushabav Chiras Gilui. The level of the Makif of the direct light, that is something that comes in a way that's revealed. But it's what type of revelation? It's not like a light that comes internalized, like, let's say, an idea that's understood by the student. Therefore, it remains in the state that's transcendent above. It has a connection to the light that permeates and becomes absorbed, and it can and will come to a state of revelation. And he's going to go back to the similar mashal we had about Makva Karev, Makva Rachik earlier. The metaphor for this is from Rav that gives over an idea or a seichel to a student. What is able to be received in the mind of the Talmud, that's called a pneumistic light. It's settled in the vessel, the brain of the receiver. But the depth of this idea, it's not possible to be received in the vessel of his brain. It remains in a state that is beyond his brain. Still in all, it's close to the person and close to the student. It mamish hovers over him, and it's so close, you can almost touch it. It could actually come down to be comprehended over time. Like a person can come to the mind of his Rebbe also on the depth of his understanding in this intellect after 40 years. But the fact that it's able for him to reach it, that means it's so close. It's true, it's makif, but still close to him. That is the makif of Ur Yashar. That's similar to what we've been using the term makif HaKarev. Aval makif Dar Chayzer she'eina ba'odei gilui klal gam le'uchinas makif. The makif of the rebounding light is not that it comes to any type of revelation whatsoever, not even in the state of makif. Adrab, just the opposite. Kol inyana hu heipach hashefesh le'yumshel begilui klal. The entire concept is the opposite of Shefa, that should not be drawn down in a revealed way whatsoever. Rather, to conceal and cover over the matter within himself, to be completely concealed. That is the makif of Ur Chayzer. Like a very deep idea that's very concealed and covered over. It's called a seichel that's concealed from all thought. In other words, no thought is capable to grasp it. So even though this concept is already there in the Maimer Rebbe Rashab of Hukechasen, so the Rebbe is going to say the Frierdiker Rebbe adds to this. And the Maimer of the Frierdiker Rebbe explains it even more in depth and adds more depth. This idea is recognizable even more so when the mashpia is busy thinking about the idea himself, not when he's communicating to the student, and then there's the Arpnimi, there's the Makif, Makvakor, Makvarochik, but within the person himself. It's known that any type of coming into an idea causes and brings about an additional light and revelation. The kasher mashpia maskul mischakim harin etoisim v'loy or v'gilu. When the mashpia is goes into it very in depth, so he comes up with ideas and he thinks to himself. So it's added to him a light and revelation. So he says, "Amram kolzo ba'or seichel shehu betanua shalam shachav v'gilui." All this in the type of light of intellect that's already in a movement of being drawn down in revelation. The example of this in the nimshal, that's the level of the Ein Sof, it's already a state of revelation within himself that reaches all the way down to no end. But in a much deeper idea, that it's concealed essentially, that the general idea of the light is in the movement of concealment. The example for this in the Nimshal is the Ein Sof that's higher to no end. Even what's becoming revealed to him, this is in such a way that the light is removed and concealed in his essence. I'm not sure of a good way to explain this, but perhaps we can say a mashal from this, from the case of Rav, that Rav said, I know that the halacha is so and so concerning a din about an egg that's I think was laid on Yom Tov. I think was concerning that, and even though he couldn't explain himself, this is what he knew and had a perception of. Perhaps this is the same idea, having an idea without it ever being able to come out. I mean, there are similar things, Chachma, but the Chachma eventually come out into Bina. This is a type of level that's beyond revelation within himself. But the Rebbe is going to say that when we deal with this level, the mashal is something that brings it out. He says, in that Maimer of Vukachos, and similarly in many places he explains, the deepest type of idea, can come in a revealed way, specifically in metaphors and riddles. Over there, the light is concealed. A person cannot comprehend it out of the metaphor. The very essence is enclosed in this metaphor. With this is an additional quality from the higher than the level that's revealed. It is only a ray. When he puts it into the mashal, the entire essence is grasped. Moisef Sham, and he adds over there, this will be understood even more so with the idea of the light. There's a tainug that's a complex tainug that's combined with the causes, and then there's an essential, pure, undiluted delight. There's a pure delight that has no connection with any particular thing that could limit it. That's because the delight reached the essence of his soul, that the essence of his soul is not at all in the category of revelation and being drawn down whatsoever. V'adrab, just the opposite, who oimid b'chinas aliyah v'istalpus l'mayla dafka, specifically standing in the way of elevation and going upwards. Therefore, he has no movement whatsoever. It's just an essential state, not a state of amshach and revelation. Because this rebounding light within his very essence, without any type of revelation being drawn down whatsoever. Similar to this pure delight, so too this very deep idea that's concealed from every thought, on its own, it has no connection and no association with a possibility for revelation, but rather in a way of ascent and going upwards to conceal and cover over within himself.